Hello, I'm Anya Camau from Anya Camau Fashion Academy. With this lesson, and after many requests of yours, I'm going to show you how you can adapt a bodice block from a size 44 Europe to larger sizes, let's say until about size 50 and above. Now let's take care of the darts. You see that there are a lot of darts on this block. The darts are used to decrease at the waistline the difference between the bust, the hips and the waist and make the garment thinner at this level. These darts give an aesthetic effect. For Elizabeth, I took a maximum measurement between the bust and the hips, bust 107 and hips 121. Thus I will begin with a hip measurement of 121 cm. I subtract the waist measurement of Elizabeth, which is 102, and I get 19 cm of difference. These 19 cm correspond to the total difference around the body. But here we are working only on a half pattern. Here you have half of the front and half of the back. Thus, we are going to divide by 2 and use the half of the difference since we are working on half of the body. I get 19 divided by 2 equals 9.5 cm. Obviously, the value you will obtain will be different since it's based upon your measurements. We will distribute this value on the waistline in 2 ways. The first is to bend aesthetically on the side. Slightly bend because if you take off too much it would be non-aesthetic, and if you do not have to take off at all it would not be beautiful either. Then we have 2 darts on the front and 2 darts on the back. We will use these 4 darts to distribute the rest of this value. For the sides, you have to take off no more than 2 or 3 cm. Here I only have 9.5 cm to distribute for half of the body, which is slightly less than for a standard size. So I will take off only 2 cm. To begin. If you have a higher difference, you can take 2.5 for example for each side, and if you have a significantly higher value, take off 3 cm. If you have a lesser difference, you can take off 1.5, but I do not advise you to go much below 1.5 cm. What does that mean? 2 cm. That means here on the side along the waistline, I simply remove 2 cm and redraw this curve. Then for the darts, as I decided to take off 2 cm here and 2 cm there, it makes 4 cm and I get 5.5 cm to distribute in another way to get my 9.5 cm in all. Again, the calculation may be different for you. Since there is a large bust, because we are on women's clothing, there is more difference to take off below the bust at the waistline than at the back. About almost twice as much at the front as at the back. And for the 5.5 cm that I still have to distribute, I choose to put 3.5 cm at the front and 2 at the back. Always keep these proportions of almost double reduction value at the front when compared to the back. Here at the front I have 2 darts, the larger being the one located under the bust point, which is always the widest dart of the front. I decide this dart is 2.5 wide, and that makes my second dart 1 cm wide. This value is correct since it's a secondary dart. Now in the back I have 2 darts for 2 cm in all, and I'm going to distribute 1 cm on each dart. Do not go below 1 cm of dart width. If your values falls below 1 cm, it's better to remove the dart, because a 0.5 cm wide dart no longer means anything. Here's a calculation method to distribute the darts and to be able to completely redraw the width and define the location of the darts. Another important point here is the bust point, since the bust point location defines the location of this dart. You can see that the lines merge toward this bust point. Here Elizabeth's bust measurement is 107 cm. That is to say more than the size 44 measurement. Elizabeth at home will measure a bust spacing, that is to say the distance between her 2 bust points or 2 nipples. Still wearing a favorite bra, then she will divide this value by 2. She will then get the distance between this line here, the middle front, and a new point, which will be her bust point and not the one of size 44. Here it is. I assume that with Elizabeth's measurements she will move outward a bust point of 1 cm. We measured before the height of the bust point and its spacing, and this point must correspond to Elizabeth's true bust point. At home you will be able to place yours, which will be located on this line. Again, this is very important because the whole front will start from that point. Now that we have defined all of this, we will also have to calculate the width that we will apply to this block. Just take the same measurements and start from the bust measurement, which is 107 cm, and divide it by 4. Why do I take the quarter? Because to go around Elizabeth's body, I have 2 fronts and 2 back pieces. But here, I'm on the half of the body, so for each piece of this base, of this block, we will take a quarter of the bust measurement of the waist and of the hips. Thus I do the calculation. For the bust I get 26.75 cm. This is where you're going to need a calculator. For the waist, 102 that I divide by 4 will give me 25.5 cm, and for the hips, 121 cm that I divide by 4 gives me 30.25 cm. So let's start with the 2 easier lines, the bust and the hips. The waist is more complex since we will also have to place these darts. For the bust, For the bust, I get 26.75 cm to report. So there will be a point a little outside of my block. That's why I asked you to add a paper strip on each piece side. We are currently redrawing a professional bodice block, and as I explained in another video at pattern making introduction step, we always add 1 cm more at the front than at the back. Why? Because the thickness of a side seam could not be seen and does not weigh down the silhouette. It's a trick that is widely used in quality clothing industry, and it's very effective. So for Elizabeth, this value of 26.75 cm is an average value, and I calculate the front value adding 1 cm. So 26.75 plus 1 cm is 27.75 cm. On this bust line, on the front, I set a point here at 27.75 cm. try to be accurate, I use a felted pen so that you can see what I'm drawing on, but rather make your lines with a sharp pencil to ensure your lines are precise enough. For the hips, we get 30.25 cm. At the front, we will add 1 cm and get 31.25 cm, which we transfer to the hips line from the middle front, and we get a point here. Thus, my new side line is going to start from this point, go down tightening, and go back to the hips point. I'm going to do the same further back, and this time removing the 1 cm that I added here to keep good measurements overall. Bust is 26.75 cm minus 1, and I get 25.75 cm, which comes here. At the hips, 30.25 cm minus 1 cm makes 29.25 cm, which I note here. That's my point, my hips point. The waist calculation is different since we have to take into account the darts we calculated before. If I go back to my worksheet, I have 3.5 cm of darts for the front, distributed between 2 darts, and I have 2 cm of darts in the back. There, pay attention to my calculation. Here at the waist, my average value is 25.50 cm, and I'm going to add 1 cm to the front, which makes 26.50 cm. Do not hesitate to write down your values at home. Thus, I should set my point here at 26.50 cm from the middle front line. But I still have to add 2 darts for a total of 3.5 cm, which I add to 26.50. 26.50 plus 3.50 makes 30 in all. Thus, on my front waistline, I set a point at 30 cm from the middle front line. Here it goes. At the back, I will do the same calculation with my back darts, which are only 2 cm wide in all. So 25.50 minus the 1 cm that I already added to the front, it makes me 24.50. Plus 2 cm of darts, this makes me 26.50, and I set my back waistline point, which is this one, at 26.50 on the waistline. Later on, we will completely redraw the darts that we have just calculated. We now have the point on the waistline here. We have set theoretically points on the waistline according to the darts we decided to apply, and here I will show the point also on the hip line. Now there's a thorough check to be done, because to get an elegant result, the waist must be slightly curved inside. Indeed, with Elizabeth's measurement, I see that between her waist, which is 102 cm, and her hips, which makes 121 cm, Elizabeth has a rather well-marked waist. Thus, her bodice block has to match her morphology and show a nice halo at the waist. At home, your measurements are different and you show little difference between bust and waist, or between hips and waist. You may get an almost straight line, but I advise you to keep a slight curve at all the same. Even only 0.5 centimeter is enough to avoid this straight line, which is never beautiful. All the calculations we did to define the dots were abstractions, and now we get to the point, get into Elizabeth's measurements and make necessary corrections to make our bodice block correspond as well as possible. You see that if I join the points at the back side between the bust line and the hip side, I find only about 0.5 cm of allow, which I find very little since Elizabeth has a nicely marked waist curve. I assume that this small allow at the waist would rather be of 1.5 cm, and again at home it could be very different for you. Thus, I decide that this point is much better located, according to her measures, than this one, though a new point at 1.5 cm on the waistline. With this new point, we see that we go up from the hips, we go inside a bit, and then come out up to the bust. But now the dots will have to be corrected so that my back width at waist level remains Elizabeth's true width, Elizabeth's true waistline. With this new point, I remove 1 cm as I change from 0.5 to 1.5 cm. And this 1 cm that I removed here, I must balance it somewhere else at the dots to eventually find out the same measurement. I thus decide to delete this small dot there on the side, the secondary one. You see, I beef it. You see that it's shorter, it's a secondary dot, and if needed it can be completely removed, but keep the other dot there, which will remain on 1 cm width only. Once you've closed this dot, you will find the good value for Elizabeth's back waist. In the same way for the front, I check my line and find out an incorrect line. You see that if I join my point from the bust line with my point on the hips line, my waist point comes out of about 0.5 to 0.5 cm. Here again, and because of Elizabeth's nicely curved waist, I don't want to keep that line. I don't like it, and it cannot match Elizabeth's true side line. I'm going to draw this line by joining together bust side point and hip side point, and apply at the waist the same hollow of 1.5 as I apply at the back side. I want, and it's very important, to have on the side of the front and the side of the back the same shape. It's very important for your clothes to get a nice vertical side seam. Now the new point compared to my old point comes inside of 1.5 cm instead of going out of 0.5 cm, which is 2 cm less than the former point. I have now to balance 2 cm, otherwise Elizabeth will not be able to get into her bodice block as it will be too small. As I did for the back, I decide to delete the second dot, which is shorter and somewhat secondary. That makes me balance 1 cm, so I still have to reduce the main dot, which is under the bust point of Elizabeth. And I will reduce it from 2.5 to 1.5 cm So my new side line will go through my new waist side point. This correction is very important to avoid any incorrect and ugly line. Now we are finally able to redraw the sides and ultimately the remaining 2 dots, since we removed 2 of them. To be able to redraw the side lines, I drew a perpendicular piece of line with a square set from this line and also here at the 2 points that we've marked on the hips line, back and front. It's very important that just here you get a right angle here and there. To draw these side lines, we first go up with the French curve . To draw this side line on both sides, we first take the ruler and we go from the waist to the bust at the side. You see, it's only a straight line. And then we have to join with an harmonious curve the beginning of the hips, you see, down there, up to the waist point on each side. To do this, I need my French curves to join the waist side point here to the line I have above my hips line. So I first have to draw a piece of curve to go outside and then find a nice way to join my side line from the hips, up from the hips. You can see that my line has no angle and it's quite harmonious. Here is a back side line. I draw on the same way. Here with my French curve, doing with 2 junctions. Here are my 2 new side lines. Now we will go on redrawing what is left of the waistline. I told you before that everything was going to move to get below the new bust point. With a square set, you will draw a vertical line that passes through the new bust point and perpendicular either to the small hips or to the waistline. I get, of course, the same vertical line. This vertical line will be the center of your waist dot. Elizabeth, only dot. Here is the line. Here you can see the length of the old dot, and I keep it as well. I just report it on the new line to keep the same length. And at the waistline, this is the place where this dot is at the maximum width, that is 1.5 centimeter, and that means that I set on each side half of 1.5 equal to 0.75 centimeter. Here and there. As you can see, adjusting a bodice block takes quite a long time. It's rather complex, but the positive point is that once you have drawn yours and make sure that this block fits you well, it will be done once and for all. Then you will be able to use it for all your patterns without asking yourself if it will fit you, since you have entirely drawn it anew according to your measurements. Now, with a ruler or a set square, it's easy to redraw this dot. This is the new front dart that we completely drew anew based on Elizabeth's measurements. Here on the back we don't have any variation of any point. This dot will therefore remain in its place. Its main line is this line, which will be redrawn entirely because the lines have been moved. It goes through the shoulder blade point, that is to say the area in the back where it projects towards the rear. To draw again this line, I'd rather take my long ruler to join this point here at the waist, going up there at the shoulder blade point, and I get this line. I'm very close to the former line with a very tiny correction. For Elizabeth, this dart is only 1 centimeter wide at the waist, so I mark a point at 1 centimeter. That makes me go there. As you see, the old dart starts from here and ends there. So I'm just going to redraw this dart here at the top and have my dart that is 1 centimeter with this line that goes through your shoulder blade point. Now it should be very ugly that this dart should go like this towards the side, which would make a broken line in the back, and it's really not beautiful. So we will simply then move the bottom of this dart using the set square to get a perpendicular below this point, on the inside of a dart, and then another point on the other side of the dart. Okay. Just to have the bottom of this dart vertical exactly under the new dart you just drew before with the same length. My dart will remain perfectly vertical when closed at this point. It must be below the middle here. And of course I beef all old lines to get it correct. Here are the 2 darts I kept for Elizabeth. Here is this dart which is under the bust point, and here is this dart which will give you just a small curve in the back. Keep on going, we will soon begin with the third part.